Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wiltz, your host for today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. I'm thinking about changing, my call sign to, the libertarian Shania Twain.
The Libertarian Shania Twain. Care to offer an explanation for why that is? No,
just because, like, I listened to a Dave Smith podcast and he calls himself the Libertarian Tupac. So I'm like, I'm gonna go for like something more popular. Like I was thinking about changing my name to Particupate David because that guy's got a killer podcast, but it's kind of the space is occupied.
Yeah, it probably is. That's a bold gambit, Tim. We'll see if it works.
Yep.
Tim, the Libertarian Shania Twain.
Yeah.
O'Connor.
Yeah. Or maybe the Libertarian Taylor Swift, because she's slightly more controversial and definitely weird as heck. So, like, I feel that.
Great. That's how I'm introducing you on the radio show. Then
I'd love it. That would be great. Do it.
Yeah, but so, folks, we got a bunch of stuff today. The order of the show is not going to be what's in the title. I think we're going to talk about the New York State cannabis stuff first.
Yeah,
and then we're going to talk about whether or not populism can be redirected to support libertarian causes.
Yeah,
I mean libertarian in the broadest sense.
Yeah, I'm defending Robert F. Kennedy. That's the side I'm taking.
Yeah,
I'm going all in on that guy.
All right. So it's gonna be fun. Then we might talk about some like NATO stuff, Russia, Ukraine stuff, cluster munitions, things, and then we could. There's a lot of things to talk about. There's also the court case that happened like last week, actually, about banning government officials from interacting in certain ways with social media companies, and then maybe if we get to it, some lighter stuff like a good idea New York City actually had, the New York City government of all places.
Right. It was honestly, it's going to be weird to talk about. It's going to be kind of like I'm going to feel weird giving compliments to Eric Adams. Like I got to brace myself for it. I got to get a little more beer in me or something. It's going to be weird.
It'll be the end of the show. Yeah, you have time.
Yeah. All right. Woo.
Thank God. Of course, that's what we're going to talk about. And yeah. Happy birthday, Larry Sharp.
Great man. Hardest working man in libertarianism, perhaps.
Yeah.
Arguably. Spike Cohen's putting on a pretty good show, man.
He is. He's giving him a run for the money. But Larry, definitely hardworking guy. Happy birthday, Larry. Also former co-host of A Free Solution as well.
A big supporter of me, big encourager of me. I can't thank him enough. And I hope, over the years, I've returned that support in the best possible way I can, Yeah,
sure. All right. Well, with that, though, we're going to go into the radio show in 5.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Libertarian Taylor Swift O'Connor.
I'm here.
That's his new name.
That's my new name. I'm just like, I'm going rabid with the populism and the craziness, because that's the only way to get attention here. Like,
you just got to glob onto something popular and ride that wave.
Yeah, Taylor Swift.
That's what you got to do. So you're gonna do Taylor Swift. T-Swift.
Yeah, she can string gibberish together and I don't know, put a little music to it, and people go crazy for it. So that's what I'm here to do.
Probably she's an artist. Respect her.
Okay, I don't know.
You're gonna take the name. I don't know. I don't really care all that much about Taylor Swift, but I know people have strong feelings about
she's
her.
Absurd.
Her
people
artwork.
love absurdity,
Anywho, we're not here to talk about T Swift. Not at all. We're here to talk about marijuana because it's a libertarian show.
Yes, man. And the incompetence with which the government is moving forward with the Office of Cannabis Management, literally bragging about how we now have several new stores open in upstate New York.
Wow. Yep. And yet, it's still nearly impossible for people to operate legally here in New York State. The ads, the ads that they were running like on 420. I know it's happened a few months, right? I can't forget about that, where they're like, oh, make sure you buy legal weed, and everyone in the replies are like, where can we buy it? You haven't allowed any stores to open yet. Well, should we go to Massachusetts? Like, what?
Well, thanks to them paying off that company from Ohio that was suing them, preventing their licensing scheme from going forward, they now can grant licenses faster and more effectively than ever. Congratulations.
Yes. So merely a snowball's pace instead of a glacier pace.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
But that does not apparently stop them from taking people out of the marijuana sales game.
Yeah, no, they sure. So there's a tweet that I just retweeted someone from one of the local news stations, from the Rochester area news stations. And you can follow me at Kevin Wilson ROC. And what it is that the this store that was operating in Rochester, who was selling like different hemp type products, and whether or not they're selling THC based marijuana products, I don't know, but they got shut down. The state apparently seized between $1.5 and $2 million worth of product from them. And they have a nice sign on their store. It says, warning, this business is ordered to stop illegal activity, and illicit cannabis seized in giant red letters.
I have experience with how much signs like that might in fact cost the taxpayer, and believe me, man, like that sign's like probably a $350 sign to have custom made and like emblazoned the way that it is. They will stop at nothing to ensure that weed is sold legally and according to their
all right, let me read the other part in the red letter. It says, illicit cannabis products have not been tested or approved by OCM and can pose a threat to public health and safety. The unlicensed sale of cannabis and cannabis products is strictly prohibited.
Prohibited. Like
that's right. Like the word prohibition, like the war on drugs that we are continuing to pursue.
Under the guise of making it legal and funding the state, filling the state's coffer with revenue from now marijuana. Like, again, guys, like just your friends will grow it for you. Don't like don't buy it. Like just smoke it for free from your friends. That's it. That's arguably that's legal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the state just gets mad if they don't get their cut. Right, like that's really the thing. Like, and it sounds like I'm making a joke, and I sort of am, but also I'm not.
We want it to be a joke, right? And the average human being in New York State, the 60 to 70% that deals with life based on trying to avoid the government, think that it is a joke, but it's not. Like, it's literally the function of the state. When I complain about things like, car permits and inspection stickers and license plates and the regulation fees and the taxes we pay on, or the tolls we pay when we're driving around, like, it's not a joke, man. The state wants its money, and it will put you in a cage if you don't participate.
Yeah, literally, that's absolutely what they'll do. And so in this case, I know some of you are thinking, some of you are listening on the radio, so some of you online are like, yeah, but like there are people who are selling like shady, not high quality products for marijuana. Yeah, I know there's some of that, but that has already existed, and chances are the stores selling this stuff are probably going to be a bit better than stuff run through cartels, but maybe not.
Yeah, and way better than oregano. Like the market's going to decide, right?
People are going to figure it out. Like, what's good. Like if there is, legit product in there, there can be not regulation. I mean, there's going to be regulation no matter what, but there could be quality assurance, like organizations that can tell you, whether or not the stuff you're getting is good, whether or not it's legit, whether or not like it's of a measurable quantity. There are ways to do this without bringing down the heavy hand of government and also keeping people safe, right? Like there are ways to do this, and we just choose not to. We choose to make it as difficult as possible so that the black market can continue to thrive. And so there are places all over New York State who are doing this type of thing, right? It's just, I don't know like what this particular owner did to like make the state mad enough to actually go after them, because there's a ton of places all over Rochester who basically sell, weed without marijuana, cannabis products without like being officially licensed, and yet, I don't know why they went after this one. Or maybe this is the start of going after a lot more, because New York State just increased the penalties for selling cannabis, because they're like, well, it's legal now. So if you're selling it without our permission, then you're really doing something wrong now.
And look, I would anticipate that one of the arguments for these shops, this owner of this shop is claiming that he has a cannabinoid license to sell hemp-based cannabinoid products, or arguably, I don't even know what that means, right? Because I'm not a rabid partaker of marijuana myself. But
right. I mean, there's like
freedom dictates that's not my defining position. Like, just because I don't do it doesn't mean I want to be telling other people not
right.
to.
I mean, there is a bunch of like there are hemp-based products that don't have like the THC elements in them, right? So they're not like psychoactive in the same way that like marijuana that you would smoke would be. It might be like salves, it might be like CBD based products, which are its own thing. There are lots of different like things that exist within this market space that aren't necessarily like stuff that's going to give you the reaction that you think happens with marijuana. And I said, it's
why bother then?
for supposedly health benefits, like the CBD stuff, like some people like are making the claim that does help with things like anxiety, with stress, with things like that. Maybe it's a little bit mixed, but
sure,
there's some legit like back science to say that like some of that might work, but I said it's a bit of a mixed bag, and you got to look at the claims too. They're shysters out there as well.
Well. So look, like, arguably, right, there's big pharmas involved in refining marijuana now, and they're certainly getting some compounds and elements out of it that they don't really want to lose control over, right? Like, if they have developed, which they have developed, a anti-epilepsy formula that comes from marijuana, they don't necessarily want to lose their monopoly power that they purchase from the government to just any store on the side of the road. So it is going to continue to be like extremely litigious, extremely rule oriented, and believe me, they're not going to just give up.
And people do that, and they'll say it's like based in the name of safety, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like part of me is like, I'm glad that pharmaceutical companies are figuring out what compounds are actually helping for medical purposes, like the epilepsy thing. There's a bunch of other use cases like where they're finding these compounds in cannabis products that like have legitimate medical purpose, but you don't want to get the other effects that go along with them if you consume it as like, say, an edible or smoke it or something else, or if like for children, right? Like, if you want children to have like help with seizures, and there's a compound in marijuana that can do that, this having a pharmaceutical synthesized product is probably a good alternative and a good solution here.
Sure,
but if you take that too far and you say, therefore this is the only safe way to consume this and no one else can consume this product any other way, that's where you lose me.
Yeah, like, so the Epidiolex, Kevin, because the pharmaceutical industry has such a rigid control over it, it's like $1,000 for a month's supply, right? Like,
right.
It's my wife is giving me information because she's an expert on these medicines. It's not even a month's supply. It's like practically per dose. Like, it's a crazy amount of money, even though it's a really effective thing, and it comes from nature.
Yeah.
And glaucoma, I got a buddy that treats his glaucoma with marijuana. Like,
folks who use it for like kind of mild pain management, like arthritis management too. And it's a thing. They work. It's functional for them. Like, again, you can have a dysfunctional relationship with marijuana products, just like anything else. But also, like, you could use that in mild doses for, as I said, pain management or glaucoma or whatever else, and still be able to participate fully in society and not be impaired in a serious way. It's possible to do that. And so, but if we keep it as a Schedule 1 drug on a federal level, and we make it impossible to sell legally on the state level, and use law enforcement resources to crack down on the places who are like in maybe a gray area, we're not going to be able to see the benefits of having freedom. Like, and the legalization of marijuana in New York State is going to be for nothing.
Well, we can't empty the jails to not fill them back up, Kevin. The for-profit prison system and the tax department needs money and needs bodies. So arguably, how do they let go of that revenue stream? They can't. So unless they really commit to this concept of freedom, they're still going to find ways to violate human beings for participating in freedom.
Specifically in the city of Rochester, I'm very pro criminal justice reform, but I am sure they can find someone who is up to no good to put in jail in Rochester. There are in fact criminals here. They are, they're stealing Kias. It's a thing.
Yeah. Imagine them. That's always. Yeah, I don't want to go down a conservative wormhole, but like when they're pulling me over for not having the right inspection tag on my car, it's like, well, isn't there somebody out there doing something really wrong, like hurting people? Like, can't we take care of that? So I get it, man. It's
you
here we
divide
are.
the state, Tim. That's the biggest crime of all.
Arguably, any there's no infraction too small that won't result in your incarceration.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're hurting other people, okay, that's just you're disturbing the king's peace. But if you're robbing the government of their money that they're coercing out of you, that's serious.
Yeah, like I mean, saw that kid get busted in England for a 5-year-old kid for not having a lemonade stand license.
I did see that.
Yeah, this is real. Like licensing protects the community, and it's like, does it though? I mean,
that's made me want to celebrate 4th of July all over again.
Thank God we separated from the redcoats, but still, like it happens here in America too. Like kids get citations for having a lemonade stand in the wrong spot. It just seems
just some government busybody just decides instead of either minding their business or or at least like saying like, hey, you can't do that, they decide to like really bring the hammer down on like children, and it's wild.
So how much time do we have left in this segment? Because I feel like we
got 5 minutes.
We've covered the failures of New York State government and the Office of Cannabis Management on numerous occasions. We've pointed out the ultimate stench of hypocrisy associated with this event. But let's get weird here, Kevin. What do you think? Like, let's take a moment and thank Eric Adams for doing something that kind of makes sense.
What did he do?
Well, so check this out. Like they instituted a class about personal finance and personal fiscal responsibility for homeless teens in New York City.
That seems reasonable. What's the catch?
At this point, the only catch that I could see is that it's not necessarily widely available, that it's really kind of targeting homeless teens in New York City, which it probably isn't a small subset of the population, but I wish that it was a small subset of the population.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a chunk of the population that needs it a lot, they needing to be able to like understand how to like navigate basic financial services is going to be important if they want to like build their way towards having a stable life. So yeah, I mean, I can't. Yeah, I'm not mad at this one. This seems like pretty reasonable, and yeah, I kind of support it. I mean, I think like for particularly homeless teens, like having support systems in place to teach them basic life skills, because obviously some things went pretty wrong in their life, in their family's life to get to that point. And
I mean, I think homelessness kind of leads to a discussion of what I would perceive to be bad parenting, and certainly it can be just a symptom of unfortunate times in a family.
Yeah,
which is fine, but we have to offer kids the skills somehow to break free of these things. And I don't think like my biggest like critique is that it's not more readily available and not more widely available in everyday schooling for every kid. Like we want to teach them about trigonometry, we want to teach them about calculus, we want to teach them about history, but we don't do like a little class or two about how to handle your finances. We used to have business math back when I was a kid, and that would be like arguably a life skills oriented class, but I don't think that that's exists anymore.
Yeah. Well, I want to respond to that in two ways. One, to be clear, I'm not blaming every family necessarily for being in that situation. Sometimes it is because like just stuff went wrong and they got unlucky. But it is important to have the tools to be able to dig your way out of that and to prevent that in the future. And the better equipped you are, the more likely you are to handle and persevere through tough situations, right? So like I'm not necessarily being like it's all their fault. I'm just saying like having the tools to be able to persevere through that is important. Second part is actually like I'm getting up there now, but like I ended up taking like kind of personal finance stuff in high school too. It's like kind of mixed in with the economics class. Like we talked a little bit about that in our economics classes as well. But like I don't to me it's just that if you can, don't rely on the government to teach your kids that stuff. You should, if you have children in your life, you should do your best to teach them that financial literacy. Don't wait for the school to do it.
Yeah, like let them run their car right out of gas and be like unavailable to go help them. It's a great life lesson. Like they literally learn something. They know that they need to have money before they go gallivanting around town. It's beautiful.
That's in the parenting TikTok that I see, they talk about natural consequences for their actions. I suppose that is one, right?
You're sure.
Yeah, natural consequences. You're out of gas or you're stuck.
Boy, that's awkward. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a pickle.
I'm here to support you morally. Like, what advice do you need right now? Like, I can help you with that. Yeah, it's just a wonderful parenting skill that I've picked up over the years.
Goodness. I never ran out of gas somehow as a teenager. The first time I ever ran out of gas was when I was like in my like mid-20s. I was just like driving around town, not really thinking about it. I was like, the gas light went out. I got like 30 miles. I'm not even leaving the city, but I was driving around and I'm like on 490 go bing, it's off. I'm like, oh shoot. And luckily I was going 60 miles an hour. I was able to get off the exit ramp and like coast into a parking lot.
Oh, that is so lucky. That really, like, as I probably mentioned on the show before, I was raised on a farm, and I can remember one time I took I was basically slave labor anyway, right? So I took the manure spreader out to the field and didn't check the gas before I hooked up and made my journey. And on the way back, I ran out of gas. And like farms are pretty big, right? We had 300 acres that we were.
You're walking a couple minutes.
Yeah, and it's like I had to walk all the way back to the barn, and the old man was like, "Well, go get a can and carry it back to the tractor." And we're like talking like, I don't know, half a mile away. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that doesn't seem right. I'm not going to do that. Like somebody else should have put diesel in it, but it was like hot. And it was like, I've pretty much never run out of gas since then. Like
that's
really a painful
important lesson.
Yeah, but it worked. It sent the message home.
All right. I've got to head to break. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. I think I did something. I used to work, do landscaping at a cemetery.
Yeah.
And I was on like the 0-turn mower, like way out in the back ones, and like just
running.
I got lazy, and I was just like going all day. I was like, I didn't feel like going back and stopping. I was like, I want to get done early, and I ran out. Like, luckily, like I was working with a friend that day, and I was like, dude, can you go back and get me gas?
Yeah, it worked out because my brother was there, and he showed up at just the right time, and like there was like a culture at the farm of like whatever the old man said, we try to like work our way around it anyway. And so I loaded up the gas and started walking, and my brother kind of came along, scooped me up, and brought me to it. But still that
teaches creativity though, the work.
Yeah, it's still a pretty valuable lesson, really, like overall. And my wife just learned this lesson about a week ago because she knows like I'm obsessed. Like once the gas light goes on or the car says we've got 50 miles, it's like I'm pulling into a gas station. I don't care what it costs.
My wife's like that. She's like we get like below like a quarter tank, and she's like, Kevin, We need to stop. I'm like, no, look, the thing says we have like 100 miles left. It's fine. And like,
My wife is so the opposite. She's like sends me a picture of she's standing next to the gas pump and the car says 0 miles and she's like, I won, you know. I'm like,
oh, no, yeah,
oh
I'm
wow.
more like that.
Yeah, oh wow. I'm like, that is
This is how but I've only ran out once.
that's
So
she ran out the other day and she wouldn't even tell me until she was back at the car with gas. Like she didn't want me to know, which like I probably would have mocked her mercilessly, but I would not have been angry, and I certainly would have went and helped her like with that situation. But she was determined to like resolve that issue on her own because of my strong feelings about when you should put gas in the car.
that's totally fair. But and we'll get to a couple of these comments though. Sam says the lemonade stand kid collect sales tax. That's probably where the kid went wrong.
Sam, I saw that comment and I almost kind of broke up right in the middle of a sentence. Like it was pretty funny. Yeah, like, and that's a thing too, guys. Like with these illegal cannabis sales, like if you're not like, there's another issue. Like if you don't collect the right amount of taxes, you're gonna end up in jail for that. Like tax evasion is worse. Like it's amazing what they did to arguably legalize marijuana sales while actually really making some penalties much more stringent. It's amazing.
No, they actually increased the penalties for selling cannabis products now, despite rolling back the war on drugs.
Yeah, and like that guy near me had his whole crop seized last summer. He's had licenses. He thought he had an agreement with a guy with the right license. He's had USDA licensing for his hemp products, and the state police came in and took $25,000 worth of product from him. Gave him a receipt. That's nice. Here you go.
Great. Alice on Facebook says government always trying to get a dime on any products. Yeah. That's what they're trying to do. And then Patricia's saying, actually has a CBD cream for arthritis that works 10 minutes. It's great. If that's if it works for you, that's awesome. There does seem to be a lot of stuff that does work for arthritis and for like anxiety. It's might be a legit thing.
I like this one, Tim Swizzy. That's like maybe that's what I'm going to go to. I mean, the freedom variant still kind of sticks. Like it works for me. I'm still making fun of the COVID kind of like hysteria, and I would love to infect everybody with a broader understanding of, real freedom. That winning a government control, an authoritarian dictate, is not real freedom.
Yeah.
So, all right, who's broken, me or Kevin? Arguably. Can you guys hear me, or can you hear Kevin, or can you hear neither of us?
All right.
We're back. Okay, good.
It was me.
Well, it was you?
To quote T Swift, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
I was like gonna panic and just check out. Would have been awkward.
Yeah. Oh man, you even hear my T Swift reference. Anyway, Kevin is broke. I hear you. Kevin's broken.
Okay. I was asking, like, who's broken, me or Kevin? Who's broken, me or Kevin?
I thought I had fixed my my Ethernet thing.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
I attempted to. Apparently not good enough.
It's the FBI, Kevin.
I knew it.
The CIA, quashing our reach.
I knew it. They're after me. There's no other logical explanation.
There's no simpler explanation than that. The Occam's razor applies.
Yeah, just when in doubt, blame the government, specifically the CIA, if possible. But
yeah, honestly, it seems like a CIA thing, for sure.
Yeah.
So when we go back, we'll do the populism thing, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do the populism thing. So we're gonna talk about whether or not populism can be redirected towards liberty, towards libertarianism. We'll talk a little bit more about RFK because there are a bunch of folks fighting over him.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I listened to like 2.5 hours of them, so I'm gonna.
Oh God, why? It's
well,
awful.
Honestly, it was hard. It was hard, guys. Like the fact that he's a Kennedy doesn't persuade me. The fact that like nothing persuades me about anyone. I'm all for tearing down, pseudo heroes. Like honestly, I'm still offended that we elected a Bush and then another Bush. Like this, I don't like it. It's weird to me. It seems anti-American. It seems anti-freedom, and it seems like we're getting into hero worship when we go down these roads. But
yeah.
RFK has some appeal that I'm going to discuss.
All right, we're going to go back in 3. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Yeah, that does sound better than
it
Taylor
does sound
Swift.
better.
Yeah, it does sound better. It really does. We've got to go with that. So, look, there's been RFK is making, not just in libertarian circles, but all over the world, kind of like, and all over the United States, is kind of making waves, right? Like certainly there's this populist uprising that RFK can be the guy. And as I've mentioned before on the show, I'm not like hero worshiping. I'm not like the Kennedy name doesn't really mean much to me other than like, yeah, JFK was a president and RFK Sr. was, a senator and maybe going to be a presidential candidate. And Teddy was a raging alcoholic, right? I mean, do I have that right? Basically. Anyways, when we get into it, though, there's a few things about Robert F. Kennedy that I find appealing. And Kevin, I invested a serious amount of time in listening to him speak. And the natural critic in me was all over him, right? But then I was really kind of trying to figure out, why is this populist wave coming around with this guy, and what as libertarians, where does he offer us some potential value? Okay, so arguably he doesn't. Like arguably he doesn't.
I don't think he does, but you make your case, Tim.
But one thing that Ryan Graham from Georgia kind of brought up a good issue. He's a good, solid libertarian who's an eloquent speaker, and he's really good at Twitter. Just kind of brought up like 2 quick things. Like he was anti-vaccine mandate and technically I'm forgetting the other one. But what I like about him is that
I thought you said he was anti-war.
Oh yes,
yeah.
That's actually I would have gotten to that, so that would have came back around. And I apologize for the little brain inaction there, but one of my favorite things about him is like he's harshly criticizing authoritarianism and the rise of authoritarianism in the Democratic Party. Now, is he himself an authoritarian? Has he made numerous statements that resemble authoritarianism? Yes. Arguably he has, but when he points an angry finger at the rise of progressive authoritarianism in the Democratic Party, I say, and people are listening to that, I say, that's good. What do you think?
I think we've been down here before. We've been down here before in the Democratic Party, in fact, too, because Bernie Sanders was the anti-establishment candidate, last time around, few times around. He was the guy who was like saying like the DNC is corrupt and Hillary Clinton's corrupt, and we're gonna change the system, and being against the establishment is not sufficient to win my support, and you're not necessarily getting something better, just something different. And RFK Jr. is like emblematic of that, because like a lot of the ways that he talks about like power in that's different than the way we talk about it is he like will say like, hey, these systems that we have built are fundamentally corrupt. They do not work. They entrench special interests, and they make it difficult for people to be able to exercise their freedom, their rights, their liberty, and to find solutions to problems in their lives and solutions to problems for others. And what he says is the problem with the system that we have is it's run by the wrong people. I want to put my people in. And he talks about that like he has pretty scathing criticism of the CIA, to the point of where he's insistent that his dad was like assassinated by the CIA. And despite like the person who killed Robert F. Kennedy like confessing to it and telling him that, but like leaving that aside, when asked like by libertarians like, well, okay, what would you do about this? He's like, well, we got to get different people in. We got to get good people in. No, you're misunderstanding the problem, man. Like the problem is like the culture and the system that the CIA is built on, the mission that the CIA has leads to the type of like corruption and shenanigans that they get involved in. And replacing it with different people isn't going to fundamentally change the nature of that agency. And same with every other guy. He talks about like the FDA in the same way. Oh, well, I'll get my good scientists in there who like understand my science. No, man. Like we'll leave aside like the crank stuff for now. Like you are fundamentally misunderstanding the problem. If you get your people in who are loyal to you and loyal to your ideology, you are replacing one type of corruption with another, and probably a worse one.
Well, arguably, right? Isn't that one of the areas where Trump failed, where he was like, "Hey, I'm anti-establishment, but I'm going to hire a whole bunch of establishment guys to help me be anti-establishment." Like, arguably, like that's a pretty solid point, right? Like, if Trump was really anti-establishment, would he have just like propped up and recycled people from the Bush administration? Like, arguably,
that's what he did.
great.
And he put some of his people in, and then he was like, I hired the best. And then now all the people he hired are like, no, this guy stinks. Or he's like, no, they're the worst. I can't believe I hired them. They're whatever. He'll say a bunch of stuff with them. But like going back to like the whole like populism thing, like can like this type of thing, like the anger at like the establishment generally do like move in the direction of liberty. And I love this quote from Thomas Massey, actually, the one where he says, all this time I thought they were voting for libertarian Republicans, but after some soul searching, I realized when they voted for Rand and Ron and me in these primaries, they weren't voting for libertarian ideas. They were voting for the craziest SOB in the race. And Donald Trump won best in class, as we had up until he came along. People are just voting for the person who's the most angry at the establishment. They're not. We thought we had a libertarian moment a few years ago with the Tea Party stuff, with the Ron Paul stuff, with Rand Paul, and unfortunately that populism shifted. And I think that's kind of fundamental to the nature of populism, because like if you don't build a foundation like rooted in liberty, what you end up having is a bunch of people who are just mad at the system. They're like, my life sucks because of the people who run things. It's the people who run things. It's the government, or it's the corporations, or, if you go down the right wing side, they're like, oh, it's the Jews. Like you can replace whoever. The people running things are the ones screwing up my life. And if you can easily switch between those, you're not rooted in like, here's why you need small government, limited, government protection of rights, why we need liberty. If you don't have the foundational principles that moor you to something concrete, you can shift in all sorts of directions. And populism often does. You see the Bernie Sanders people shifting all over the place. You see the Trump people shifting all over the place with national conservatism and going to RFK, the Trump, the Bernie. There's a bunch of people who are all over the place in those areas. That's what I think we get when we embrace populism.
I got to be honest, like that was a beautiful presentation. And so as like a guy that was interested in the Tea Party, what I felt happened there, but also I do think I have to concede that I'm rooted in concepts of liberty and have been for a long time, even though arguably I was a liberal, arguably I was conservative, like arguably I made some shifts, but what always kind of divorced me from whatever current thing I was involved in was the fact that what they're saying does not make sense to me, that it's philosophically inconsistent, that I'm finding cognitive dissonance. But when it came to the Tea Party, what happened was that in a way that they came to power by promising liberty. And what we saw was that they then became part of the machine. Almost all of them, except for like Massey and Justin Amash, they sacrificed all of their principles for popularity, money, and power. And it was like, wow, they freaking betrayed us. And so how I get anti-establishmentism because I am that as well. But I get excited when I see a Robert F. Kennedy making noise about things that I like, that fit my narrative and that give me hope that other people will wake up to it. So in a way, what I hear from you is like, I feel almost like hopeless in a way. Like it hurts me because it takes a different intellectual plane to get where we are.
Yeah. And to me, like, I don't want you or anyone else to feel like hopeless in this, right? All I'm saying is just, I don't necessarily get excited about populist movements if it ends up getting built around anger that isn't attached to anything else, right? Like if
Sure.
they're just mad at the people in power, and then their solution is give power to us, and sometimes, like in the case like people like Bernie Sanders and Trump, it was give more power to me and I will fix this. That's the road to serfdom right there. That's exactly like
It's a good point, man. It's a powerful point, and I think it's going to be lost on not so much our audience and not so much the people that we interact with, but like it's lost to the general public that when they're like, "Hey, we're going to take over and we're going to win this year," like the Republicans are saying that, we're going to fix these things. Like the rage at Thomas Massey sticking to the principles of the Constitution was palpable on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, like he stuck to the principles. I hate Adam Schiff as much as I identified that guy as a liar long before the general population was going, this guy is a disgusting creep. Okay, long before all of that happened, and Thomas Massey stuck to principles and justice and the laws as written in the Constitution, which are supposed to mean something. And people freaked out, are still tangibly angry at him. Like he can make the best point in the world right now, and he still has 20 people coming on his tweet saying, "Wow, you're an idiot. We're going to make sure you lose." And it's like, wow.
Right. I mean, this is what happened to Justin
man.
Amash. Yeah, this is what happened to Justin Amash. Yeah,
he's got principles.
Yeah, he does. I'll give that. I don't always agree with Thomas Massey, but like he is nothing if not principled in most cases. And I said,
well, Ron DeSantis thing, like that early endorsement of him was one of his least principled moves that I've seen him make, and I was disappointed. Right, like let's see what builds here. RFK also retroactively, Kevin, is anti-COVID lockdown, anti-COVID vaccine mandate.
Right.
Whether he was then or not, I like the fact that he's giving permission to the people in the Democratic Party who think those things were crazy to be comfortable saying that those things were crazy and that we need to plan better for this next whatever it may be. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, I think that's I get that. I get that point because, like, man, there's a lot of social pressure among people left of center to like say that everything that happened during the COVID time was like justified and worth it. And depending on like, and I think some of that's broken through, but like it definitely still is there and still exists with a lot of folks. Like, but some people, like, whatever their breaking point was, if they're like, yo, I don't want to mask my toddler, that's dumb. Like, or if it was the vaccine thing, okay, sure, like that's not my thing, but I get like the government shouldn't have required that in certain places. And getting people in that party to talk about the ways in which the government might be flawed, I get it. I see some value there, despite the very flawed candidate talking about it.
Sure. And arguably, like, no matter what, at the end of the day, I see his rhetorical flourishes. I see the games that he's playing with certain issues. Now, I do appreciate an honest discussion about the validity of the mRNA vaccinations, but I can see where people would label him as disingenuous, right? Like he's got an interesting tactic when it comes to those conversations that makes me uncomfortable, and I couldn't quite put my finger all the way on it.
No, I mean he'll like sort of fudge stuff, or he'll be like, he'll like vaguely refer to like studies that like represent his point of view, and he doesn't really like understand or want to understand whether or not those studies might be flawed or say something different than what he claims they say. And then he'll say things like, people like, like you're kind of anti-vaccine, like, well, I'm not anti-vaccine, I just I support the vaccines that I support. And then they're like, okay, well, do you support any? Well, no, because like and he'll give some like vague reasons about it. And,
Sure.
And so like that type of slipper he does the same thing with nuclear power too. And he's like, oh, I'll support nuclear power, but I want to make sure it's safe. And like, until it's safe, I think I just can't support nuclear power. And I'm like,
right. Until somebody
except for, and I'm not doing
money.
His voice either. I can't support nuclear power.
His voice does drive me crazy, guys. I got to be honest with you. I did lose track of where I was going to go next with Robert F. Kennedy. There's one. I like his position on Russia, Ukraine, arguably is less offensive than Mike Pence, right? Like Mike Pence is like, hey, we've got to get Ukraine weapons faster. So like, okay.
Well, I mean, we're Tim, we're setting the bar super low.
I know.
There's a lot of low bars. We're gonna be
He-
tripping over low bars everywhere in this.
He did offer some nuance that I didn't hate about his position on the war, and he's like very proud of his son's service in the mercenary army, sponsored by the United States, that's are actively participating in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
he's like, you know, we went there with the right reasons. I think we need to re-examine those reasons. Arguably, I'm ostensibly like on the same boat as him, like when
Yeah.
it comes to that. Now, whether I don't think I'm being more genuine, right? I'm more consistently just like anti-war. Let's figure this out. He's definitely a populist narrative. I did experiment with a little bit of populism of my own today, and how to.
Tim, we're gonna have to wait because we are
Man.
coming up on a break. So thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right, Tim. Are you gonna?
Your explanation was excellent, like really well done. Like I admired it. Okay, so are we going to be able to capture populism? I don't know. And are we going to continue this conversation for a little bit in the next segment, so where I can talk about arguably the experiment I played on Twitter today?
Probably we can do that. So I'd love for populism work, and I was like, I kind of would do that, right? Like I showed up and I did rallies with folks who are like kind of in that populist camp, like, yeah, we're all mad and we're mad at the same people. And so, I thought that like we join a team and do that, and then we'd end up with more liberty somehow because we all hate the government. But
Right.
The problem is that sometimes it actually there's interesting like Pew polls around this about like when people are mad at the establishment, when people are mad at government, you would think that would mean that we want to give government less power, but the opposite happens a lot of times, because what ends up happening is like we are so afraid of the people in power now that we need to seize power for ourselves and punish that group to make sure that they can't take power again.
Arguably, that's a perfect description of what the dynamic is of our uniparty system, right? The participants know that, right? Like we might lose this year, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is just attack, and then we're going to win, and then we seize the power. And really, all they do is accumulate more and more power, ever flowing upward towards a centralized authority. And
right. And so, like,
honestly, like a little bit of fear in my soul about that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's kind of depressing, right? And like the unfortunate part is like sometimes you got to just like not play the game, right? Like you got to be like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not participating in that. I know you're mad. You're mad at the right people, but your solutions suck. So like we're gonna like build some grassroots liberty movements and like try to like gain ground where we can. And it's, I don't know, to me, like attaching yourself to. Because I don't know how far he'll go, but Robert F. Kennedy is he's a cult of personality in the same way that like Trump is and Bernie is and Obama was, and
Bell Biv DeVoe. They sang that song, Cult of Personality.
yeah, there we go. But also not for nothing, but like Kennedy being an anti-establishment candidate, come on, just doesn't seem right.
No, like I think one of the most valid points you made is that like we're going to take all of these systems and put good people into these horrible systems, and that's going to fix everything. It's like the CIA and the FBI admitting they made a mistake, but we have now enacted controls to prevent that mistake from happening again. But we are going to happily stumble into our next mistake, and you guys aren't going to know about it for years. So don't worry, we've got this. Like that's real. That's obnoxious, and that's a fact.
Yeah, that's the thing. And until we start getting to the root of the problem, not like we're gonna fire some of the bad people, replace them with good people, and keep doing the same thing. Like I said, until we make the next mistake. No, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for America. But
doesn't
here
work
we
at
are.
all. Like, get rid of these jokers. Just do away with it. Like they're not helping. Arguably,
Yeah. But so anyway, I know we got to get back to the show eventually. We probably should talk about the your poll. Talk about that, and we can talk about the Ukraine stuff, the NATO stuff, all that.
Yeah, sounds good.
But Yeah.
Well, I can blast through because it's just in context of what we talked about right now with Robert F. Kennedy, what I tried to do, and arguably it certainly was stimulative, for a poll that I created, and it stimulated a lot of good conversation. So yeah, let's get right back into that. That would be good.
All right, great. So we'll go back in 15 seconds. My kid is still up.
Oh my God, that's great.
All right, back in 5, 4. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
All right, so we're just in the vein of populism. I thought that libertarians could use experiments in populism to see if we can meet people where they are and persuade them that there's positions that we can take that would help decentralize or eliminate government power or hold them accountable for really, really bad decisions. And so arguably on the top of the list, a lot of people are very concerned about Social Security. So I made a poll based on the following statement. Social Security isn't an entitlement. It's a fraudulent contract unilaterally forced on unwitting participants, and the federal government should be held accountable for its completely unethical actions. And basically, I offered the following responses. Wow, that's a weird take, wrong, correct. And then my normal just kind of outlier to let people check the results if they aren't interested in answering. How dare you, in a typical Greta Thunberg voice. So basically, overwhelmingly, people agreed with my premise. Like something like 95.7% agreed with my premise. I got a how dare you or a couple of how dare yous and weird take. And a few people felt like perhaps I was wrong. And then, so arguably, like libertarians are going to say, hey, we should just end this crap because it's such a bad system. But arguably, to me, there's a promise that was made by the federal government that you stole this tax to provide us with a retirement. And I think that we can meet people where they are if we frame our goal there. And arguably, like, I feel as though I met with some success. I'm not saying I'm the right guy to build these bridges, but I feel as though talking about Social Security as a failure of government and a way that the government has manipulated us, and the issue preservation plays into Social Security, fear mongering plays into Social Security. And so when a standard libertarian comes on and says, let's end this program, I'm like, well, you're technically never going to win with that position, right?
No.
And arguably, you're empowering the uniparty to say what we're going to do to just take the libertarians right out of this. We're definitely going to find a way to salvage Social Security, and that salvaging is going to require more theft, right? So if we force the government through the process of agreements that they've made to the American people to take a hard look at their expenditures, I'm saying, is that a platform that could build popularity within the Libertarian Party? And I would like to say yes to that, but arguably I have no way of knowing if that's correct, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's right either. Because stuff. It's people. To me, I think like no one is going to shift position. Like you either know exactly what you said, that here's this program that's essentially a Ponzi scheme that was like foisted on the American people who assumed it was a good deal, but like really was never sustainable in the first place.
Sure.
And we should do some corrective action to that. But a lot of people are like, I am entitled. I should be getting that money, and it's going to work. The politicians just need to fix it.
Arguably, it was presented as I'm purchasing a retirement plan from the government through compulsion, sure, and through coercion, sure. But that's what I did, right? Arguably, I've been paying into it for years, and if you're going to invalidate that contract, give me my money back with a penalty for lying and your failure, and a return on my money that I would have gotten in the free market. Like that's so.
Yeah,
Harry Brown, I think it was Harry Brown was like, "Hey, we made an obligation. The federal government made an obligation. Let's sell all federal government assets to cover this obligation." I think that's like, will that capture populist, anti-establishmentarianism? Let's call it, which is a big word that I made up. No, right? It won't, but maybe it will.
Yeah, it would be interesting if it would. Like I said, I think of. We're not France, but I do think of what happened in France where they like tried to raise the retirement age slightly. We're not going to like riot in the streets in the same way over Social Security, but like you got people like Trump going like, the Democrats want to harm your Social Security, I'm going to preserve it. And you got Biden saying the same thing. Republicans
Sure.
are trying to take away your Social Security, and I'm trying to preserve it. They're both lying. Neither party has any intention on doing anything until we go over a cliff, and then they
Right.
can point their fingers at whoever happens to be on the wheel at that point in time.
Well, arguably the problems will be solved through devaluation, right? Like if they devalue the currency fast enough, if they figure out ways to craft inflation into the narrative, then the devaluation of the currency will take care of the Social Security problem. But that will be a massive devaluation, and the retirement promised will be actually disruptive. And I think that a lot of senior citizens on retirement, on Social Security are already feeling that pinch just from recent bout of inflation, which is nothing compared to what they could in fact do.
Right. Yeah.
And that scares me, right?
No, it is. And it's the unfortunate part is that it's going to be pretty tough to like rely on that as a significant part of any retirement income now. And that the entire promise that it was meant to keep doesn't really apply in the situation we're in now. And also like it's not solvent, it's not sustainable as structured.
Right. The only way I see to make it sustainable, given the current situation, arguably, is devaluation, or if we force the government to make really what would apparently be difficult choices for them, right? Like, let's say we put the military industrial complex up against, and our war machine overseas, especially, guys, and put that up against Social Security and say, look, we have to make tough choices. What should we do? And I'm a skeptic of and look, being a child of the 80s and 90s, I'm familiar with neocon philosophy. And so I'm like, the Soviet Union is disbanded. We formed NATO to stand against the Soviet Union, who was actually our ally in World War II just a year before. So it's like, this is a bizarre organization, and should we be part of it? Like, I want to ask that question, and I want to tie it to Social Security. And so maybe it's crazy, right? Like, so maybe I'm just wishful thinking, how can we take the Libertarian Party to the next level? And one of the ways I think we can do it is by attacking populist issues with realistic solutions that sort of infuriate people while pointing our finger at the government did this to us. It doesn't matter who's in power now. It's been a complicit action through the years of using it to accumulate power to the government and lying to us. Like, the only way to fix it is devaluing the currency, arguably. Not the only way they see how to fix it is to devalue the currency.
Yeah. I mean, listen, maybe it works. If that seems to be the way to get things done, is to ride a wave of anger. It's not the way I like to do things. I don't think it's the way you like to do things either. But
no, but keeping calm solves nothing.
Yeah, it's that's what is like rational and sensible isn't always what works well in politics. Like, sometimes people are motivated by different things, either tribalism or anger, anti-establishment fervor, or like whatever, right? And
I love anti-establishment fervor, though. I do. I love it, and I feel like if we get in there and pull the right, and it's arguably wishful thinking, but if we get in there and pull the right strings, like, anti-establishment fervor is, in a sense, like, somewhat libertarian, even though they turn to authoritarian populists to satisfy their anti-establishment lusts, right? Like,
yeah,
it's a problem.
It's a thing. Like, maybe if Donald Trump decided to just like stay out of the race in 2016, maybe Rand Paul ends up being the guy or something, right? Like, that's
right.
The counterfactual is like the populist wave, and instead of carrying Donald Trump, it carries Rand Paul. The Tea Party wave like continues in the Republican Party, and I mean, like, it worked with like that's kind of how like Ronald Reagan got into power, right? It was like a long-term populist wave. Like, that's what it was. That's what ended up carrying into power. It started with Barry Goldwater and like riding up through like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I was arguably like, I wanted Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders to be the nominees, because that's the real mature societal conversation that we needed to have in 2016, and everything's been utterly debased ever since. Like, is it socialism and government sponsored socialism, or is it freedom and liberty and accountability that will carry us into the next generation, right? So Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders would have been the ideal candidates to have that conversation with.
Yeah, I mean, they would have had great conversations about the proper number of deodorants that we're allowed to have.
And how much is the real price for a loaf of bread as set by the government? Like, should it really be $1.30 or should it be $17.47? I don't know.
Yes. Well, as long as the government fixes it, I'm sure that they're looking out for our best interest.
As long as they regulate it and fix the
So
price, that's all.
done by committee, I'm sure. The Democratic People's Committee.
What a mess that would. Like Bernie Sanders, honestly, like I know Patty loves him, or used to love him, but honestly, he is exactly what you're saying, an authoritarian populist who uses the tool of socialism and lies to manipulate people.
Yeah, that's
Socialistic lies. Let's call it that.
Yeah, and I said it's hard to distinguish too. Like, I think like you and I sometimes disagree. Like, he might be a true believer. Like he really might be. He might believe in what he's doing. He's a guy, and he just like
I'm suspicious.
Yeah, gets a little bit of that power lust that like not to say like, well, if we just take a little bit of power now, like we can fix all the problems and it'll all be okay, right? Like,
yeah,
there's probably a lot of people like Bernie who believe they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. They believe it. Those are the most dangerous people of all, right?
Yeah, make me king for one day, guys, and like, holy cow, everyone would hate me, but like I would gut the state, it. Like ATF, you're fired. FBI, you're fired. No, there's no forwarding plan. Like, we're not moving forward with a reconstruction. You're just fired. Go find jobs. That's it.
Walk away. Get out of here.
Just walk away. You're not getting.
We have sold the building.
Yep. I got to pay Social Security somehow. The FBI building would be a great place for a manufacturing plant. You guys are done.
Right.
I'm just saying. It would be handy because there's a lot of people around too. We could just, I don't know, make bicycles and stuff. It'd be great. It's going to be batteries. We'll make batteries there. I don't care. It's sold. It's not my problem. Somebody else bought it.
Yeah. Well,
you're done.
As long as if you're selling any buildings in New York State will find a way to subsidize the heck out of them. And we will still end up paying for it somehow.
Oh my God. And then when you want to leave New York State, they're going to shake you down for like $1 billion, like they did to XLS, Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're just like, yeah, you can leave, give us $1 billion. It's like not even subtle. They're just like, give us the money and then you can leave. And it's like, well, being in New York sucks so bad. We're giving you the $1 billion. See you later. That's just amazing,
Yeah, I guess at some point in time, you do the math and you're like, well, it's still going to be cheaper to just get out of here. Pay the extortion money, get out. I'm not actually all that familiar with that story. So I'm going to have to go look it up now. I don't know much about the XLs having to pay money to leave.
I was griping about it a little bit, and one of my friends who was very familiar with the transaction said, "Oh no, it's worse than that. It's worse. They literally had to pay $1 billion to leave New York State, like just to the state. Right. Like no real justification. Just
when like you got to pay back these subsidies we gave you or something. These tax
probably
breaks.
Arguably that's how it was framed, right? Like but there was no the subsidies were given. There was no codicil to have them paid back. It was just like. You have to give us.
There's always strings attached, Tim.
Yeah,
always strings attached.
Exactly. So, look, are we running out of time? I mean, we
got
a couple things.
We got 2 minutes left.
Oh my God! All right, cluster bombs in a rare, we got to talk about them because A, cluster bombs are horrible. B, they're illegal all over the world. C, Lindsey Graham supports them, and that's disgusting. So does Adam Kinzinger, also disgusting. These reprehensible human beings are in favor of sending cluster bombs to the Ukraine, even though they are one of the most atrocious weapons of war available. So in rare bipartisanship, which generally bipartisanship, Kevin, as you know, means they are getting together to steal our rights. They're going to be like, hey, let's all raise taxes because it's for the good of the war machine. Or, I mean, they won't, arguably. But they're getting together. Conservatives and liberals are saying, let's not send cluster bombs to Ukraine.
No,
I like it.
There's a reason why most of the world doesn't use them. They're even the relatively low failure rates of cluster bombs going off for U.S. produced bombs. They are still too high. There's still going to be people who are going to be getting killed years later. That's a consequence of cluster bombs. And I think, Tim, what you're really trying to say is that heroes like Ilhan Omar, one of your favorite members of Congress, who is also opposed to cluster bombs.
Yeah, I love her.
Is it you're gonna you support
her and Matt Gaetz coming together.
Yeah,
on an issue of justice. It's like Ketanji Brown and Neil Gorsuch coming down on the Supreme Court and coming down on the same side. It's just like, I can feel the unity, man. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And look,
No,
I love being anti-war. It makes me feel very comfortable and very happy that somebody says, look, all of this is bad. People dying is bad. And I'm very proud that I matured enough to be able to say that repeatedly, regularly, and strongly, and remain committed to that. And so, I don't know,
Yeah.
Great.
no, all right, but
It's actually a good moment. It's okay. I'm happy.
yeah, it is a nice moment when people come together to oppose like what is an actual bad thing. But that being said, we're gonna have to continue this conversation outside of WYSL. Appreciate y'all listening, WYSL audience, but we gotta go. Have a great night. Take care. All right. Yeah. No, it's nice. Yeah, it's been reading a lot about like the cluster bomb stuff. Knew a bit about it before, but got refreshed on like, yeah, they're not great things. Like in the US, Russia, and Ukraine are like three places that still do use them, that still allow them. And even though I'm like probably a little bit less mad about the US sending like weapons to Ukraine than like you are, I think like
I'm really mad
almost
about
every
it.
libertarian. Yeah, I know. I think every libertarian I've seen is like, why are we sending cluster bombs? That's dumb. Like, if we're gonna send them anything, like not that.
Yeah. Look, so one of the things that offends me about it that I think gets underplayed is that arguably when we send munitions and we send weaponry, number one, we have a hard time knowing where it's going to end up. But more importantly to me even is that we then get to say that GDP grew or arguably I'm upset that these things get counted as a net positive on our gross domestic product, and I that offends me to my core. Like,
no, so I remember when I was still like very concerned, when I was like neoconish, like when I was like,
and I was there.
So I remember hearing Ron Paul speak at CPAC, and he's like, we don't make our country richer by taking our money, using it to build stuff, and blowing it up overseas. And it was like such a simple explanation. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Right?
Like, how does that make us like the whole like we got out of the Depression because of World War II thing? No, that's nonsense. Like, the war could still be like worthwhile, but like it didn't boost the economy. And the war does not boost the economy ever. You're destroying things. You're destroying wealth. You're just taking your material and blowing it up and taking lives and destroying them. And it may be necessary in extreme situations, but it does not make you wealthier. It does not help the economy. And it's just,
it's the broken window fallacy that allows the government to steal from us, right? Like it's one of the ways that they are allowed to make pretend that the economy is better than it is. That it allows us to say, hey, look, these numbers look really good. And it's like, hey, a lot of those numbers were dumped into the sea or were used to blow people off the face of the planet. Like this is really not cool because it is actually throwing wealth away. I get the boom bust cycle of the economic thing that Keynes tried to address with his modern monetary theory, but sure, there is some validity there. Like I get it. Like there is some value to discussions about that, especially with the way we make money now. But we've gone so far off the rails that I think even Keynes would be rolling over in his grave with the pretext of modern monetary theory and what they've done with it. It was to stabilize the value of the dollar and to stabilize the economy, to transfer some of the boom into the next bust and transfer some of the next bust into the next boom. That makes sense, right? Ostensibly, philosophically, that makes sense. Great. But what we're doing now, throwing cars into the ocean, like giving used artillery and bombs to Ukraine.
Tim is still mad at cash for clunkers.
Yeah, I will never not be mad. It ultimately ruined my life. I used to, arguably because I like buying used cars, and the more used cars are available, the better the market is for me. Like, so that's my argument. But it's more than that. Like, we threw accumulated wealth into the ocean to prop up communism.
Yeah,
the broken window fallacy, right?
No, like it is.
That's what we propped up. Government theft. And yes, Dr. Becker, I am already against the next war, and the next war is almost assured. Right? Like it's almost assured.
gonna happen. I for one am excited to get into the next Article 5 conflict when Ukraine joins NATO an hour and 20 minutes after
I thought that
the
was
current
crazy.
conflict ends.
But first of all, arguably, like there was a lot of talk about, hey, we're going to admit Ukraine into NATO at this NATO summit right now, and Zelensky's there dressed like a field officer. You know,
Right. Well, that's his
this
look
guy's
now. That's his brand. He's got a brand.
bullshit. Oh, sorry. Oh no, we're not on the radio.
No, we're not
Sorry.
on the radio, so you can
Oh,
swear now.
bullshit. This guy's a phony. Like that dressing like a guy in the field shooting guns is nonsense. It makes him look more like an actor than he ever has before. Like it offends me, you know. He's a politician. Arguably, I understand him standing up for the Ukrainian people and their right to sovereignty, okay? But I feel as though there's bigger forces at play and that he's kind of like a bit of a pawn here, that he's making himself wealthy. And dude, like these people are wearing like Versace and he's dressed as a field commander and it's like, come on, man. Like, do you not see what like
he's doing it to make a point? I get it. Hey, it's his brand now. This is how he dresses.
Yeah.
It's like Steve Jobs wearing the turtleneck. Like he wears his field clothes. Steve Jobs wears turtleneck. Same thing. And also it's like to draw the contrast between like him where, hey, my country's at war and I am participating in it like actively, and you are comfortable in Europe and don't have to face this. We're fighting this battle so you don't have to. Like that's why he's doing, like, I get it, like as a marketing play. Like I legitimately think he's like a marketing and PR like genius. Like I think his government, like his team is very smart at this stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, Kevin. I really do. Because I do get caught up in certain, frustration things, like, and that's one of them, that the optics of, war. I almost consider all of the optics to be somewhat of a propaganda, but sure, like, there's legit Ukrainian people that are being slaughtered, right? Like,
So it's a real thing, and like his like being good, like I can recognize it as propaganda and also recognize it as well done propaganda.
Yeah.
Whereas like there's some stuff that comes out of Russia that's like hilariously bad too.
Yeah.
But some stuff that's like good is well done, that gets people motivated. Like the same thing. They're playing a propaganda war as well, and they're trying to win the hearts and minds of like policymakers in Europe and in America to either support or oppose giving more like aid to Ukraine and getting them more involved with European alliances. And like it's incumbent upon like our politicians to see through all of that and come to like a good decision on what is actually in the best interest of the country that they represent. Is it worth risking greater war with Russia to bring Ukraine into NATO? And they decide like, no, not right now, because that would obviously trigger an immediate Article 5 response that would have all of Europe jumping in, and who knows what Russia would do, but they might in the future. And, it's hard to say what the long-term consequences of that. And, I have said, like, I get what Ukraine is doing. I defend their sovereignty. I understand. I think Russia's the aggressor here, but also there's a lot of risk to having them join NATO. And also, like, as much as I think like they are a much better, like I don't really buy the stuff like, oh, they're just run by fascists, all that stuff. I don't buy into that, but there's legitimate corruption there. Like it is a problem. They do need to address it, and that is like part of like joining NATO and also like joining the EU, is they need to address those issues. And maybe the carrot of joining those things is enough to like bring about legitimate reform, but it does need to happen. And you have and you have situations like the elections. Like I actually you tweeted about this, whatever, it's like week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where with that Zelensky had suspended elections in Ukraine. I was like, is this like some like Russian nonsense? I'm like, no, that's a legit thing. They said during martial law, during a state of emergency,
by suspending the elections. Thank you.
Yeah, it's but and they're like, well, that's what the Constitution says. When we declare martial law, like we don't have elections because we can't guarantee that elections will take place in some of these like disputed territories effectively, so they can't get like proper representation in parliament. Right. So like I get it, but also like they need to try. And what's weird is like Zelensky's overwhelmingly popular in Ukraine right now, like because in the same way that George George W. Bush was popular in the U.S. like right after 9/11, like people were rallying behind a leader.
Yeah,
So
it was
like
crazy.
you'd
He had
win.
figures in like 90%, 89%. It was bizarre. It was a bizarre time. And arguably I was caught up in that, right? Like I was still kind of a neocon. I certainly was buying into the notion that a compassionate conservatism, which meant a smaller government, could be a good answer towards freedom and liberty. And it was just all a lie, right? Like it was just like, let's prop up the war machine and whatever. It was he made me a libertarian. You guys are so welcome to me. So I don't know what to say. Zelensky has a great makeup artist, costume director, and scriptwriter. Arguably, like I get that. That's the vibe I get occasionally.
Buddy Sean on YouTube.
Yep.
And yeah, thanks, Sean Hannon. And like, so you look at that and you're like, he's not legit. He's like virtue signaling, right? Like you see this as like being fake. Whereas like I look at it and I'm like, man, like that's what you got to do to like, craft a message. And like I said, I get it. And like him doing those things doesn't necessarily make him bad. Like in the same way, like even people like Larry does this too, right? Like he's an authentic guy, but like he does like try to present himself in a consistent and honest way to try to like have a message that in a brand personality that resonates with people, right? Like, so people that we like Larry Sharp in the Libertarian Party does this as well.
Sure.
And he's good at it. And that's why he has the respect of like a lot of people and a big following in New York State among libertarians. And so anyone who's trying to build political power, you're going to have to like build a brand and do your thing, whether or not you accept that as legitimate or not, I guess is a matter of opinion. If you're not accepting it, then maybe it's not that good. But to me, I said, I see what he's doing. I see how it motivates people. We're not really his audience. Exactly.
Well, I'm not right. I'm definitely not his target audience. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Which is fun. So let's deal with David's comment, because David is a war skeptic, which I respect. I respect that. I am a war skeptic. I am anti-war. I go further than being a war skeptic, which allows me to broadly condemn Russia and arguably some support for Ukraine that I think is prolonging the war. That doesn't mean that I hate Ukraine. That doesn't mean I'm offended by them wanting to not become part of Russia.
Why do you love Putin so much, Tim?
Yeah, I know. Why are you pro-Putin? And it's like, he's a psychopath. I'm not pro-Putin. He does some funny shit on Twitter, but like he's also crazy, right? Like, so money laundering, I think there is a case to be made that some of the FTX money disappeared into Ukraine and made it back to political coffers. I think that
it could be.
Like that this argument is not invalid on its face, right? Like I don't think it is. So
no, there are problems with Ukraine, and I said, interestingly enough, Zelensky was a guy who ran on like anti-corruption stuff, right? Like
sure,
and there were problems with corruption. There were problems with corruption related to the Burisma stuff, that Hunter Biden was involved in. And I said the whole like strange thing about it is then Donald Trump calls up Zelensky after he wins the election and is like, "Hey, can you open up this investigation?" And if you do, you still get the money, your aid package. If you don't, maybe you don't get the money. And then he's going on about Ukrainian corruption. I'm like, bro, you participated in it. You tried to be a part of it.
I love that though. Like arguably, like that was a great moment in history of like Donald Trump thinking he could just like authoritarianly kind of do things that ended up blowing up in his face, arguably.
Yeah, no, that got him impeached.
And it was so for me, it's hilarious, like there were things about Trump that arguably like trying to expose corruption and trying to manipulate that Georgia guy for votes and stuff like that like arguably I see as hilarious. Like I get where other people think it's like evidence of like megalomania, which maybe it is, but like also it's kind of like weirdly hilarious.
It's one of those things like there's a lot of stuff about politics that'd be a lot funnier on a TV show than in real life. Like if you're outside of it, not actually facing the consequences of them doing like clown stuff, like then it's funny, but now it's like no, we gotta live with this. It's a real guy trying to do real things.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Anyways, Kevin, I had a blast tonight, man. It was great.
Been fun. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for all the awesome comments. But yeah, I think we're gonna call it a night.
Yep, and I'm already against the next war already.
That's right.
Stand firm.
Same. All right. Take care, folks. Bye.